I found pamphlets for gambling addiction treatment hidden in my son's car while borrowing it for grocery shopping. When I asked him about it, he broke down and admitted he'd lost Emma's entire college fund in cryptocurrency gambling and didn't know how to tell her. Before we start, don't forget to like this video, comment where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this. Have you experienced something like this? Please let me know in the comments. My name is Dorothy Walsh. I'm 72 years old, and I live in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And this is the story of how I discovered my son had stolen my granddaughter's college fund for gambling, and how I made sure Emma got her education while he learned the consequences of betraying his own child's future. It was a sunny Saturday morning in March, when I borrowed my son Kevin's Ford pickup truck to drive to the Walmart on May Avenue, because my car was in the shop getting new brakes. Kevin had offered to drive me himself, but I'd been driving for 54 years and wasn't ready to depend on other people for basic errands like grocery shopping. As I was adjusting the driver's seat to accommodate my shorter height, I noticed some papers that had fallen between the seat and the center console. I pulled them out thinking they might be important documents Kevin had dropped accidentally, but what I found made my heart sink with a combination of concern and growing dread. They were pamphlets from the Oklahoma Council on Problem Gambling, with titles like Recognizing the Warning Signs of Gambling Addiction and Getting Help When Gambling Controls Your Life. There were also printouts from cryptocurrency gambling websites with Kevin's username visible in the corner, showing losses that totaled tens of thousands of dollars over the past 8 months. My first thought was that Kevin might be in financial trouble and too embarrassed to ask for help, something I could understand, given his pride and his struggles since his divorce 3 years ago. But as I looked more closely at the dates on these gambling records, I realized they coincided perfectly with the period when Kevin had been managing Emma's college fund, transferring it from the simple savings account I'd been contributing to into what he called higher yield investment opportunities. Emma was my 18-year-old granddaughter, Kevin's daughter, and the light of my life since her mother had moved to California after the divorce and barely maintained contact. I'd been contributing $200 every month to Emma's college fund since she was 2 years old, money I could barely afford on my fixed income, but saved by clipping coupons, buying generic groceries, and skipping small luxuries so my granddaughter could have the education opportunities I'd never had. When I got home from the store, I called Kevin and asked him to come over immediately. "We need to talk about Emma's college fund and these pamphlets I found in your truck," I told him, my voice steady despite the fear growing in my chest about what his reaction might reveal. Kevin arrived within 20 minutes, his face pale and his hands shaking in a way I'd never seen before. He sat down at my kitchen table and put his head in his hands before I could even ask my first question. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice muffled by his hands and thick with shame. "I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could make the money back before anyone found out." "How much of Emma's college fund is left?" I asked, though I was already afraid I knew the answer from his reaction. Kevin looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "None of it. It's all gone. I lost everything in cryptocurrency trades, and I don't know how I'm going to tell Emma that her college money is gone 3 months before she's supposed to start at OU." The next hour was one of the most difficult conversations of my life, as Kevin explained how his gambling addiction had progressed from occasional online poker games to daily cryptocurrency trading that he'd convinced himself was investing rather than gambling. What started as small bets with his own money had escalated into using Emma's college fund when his losses mounted and he became desperate to recover what he'd already lost. "It started with Bitcoin," Kevin explained, his voice hollow with shame and exhaustion. "I put in $1,000 of my own money and made $3,000 in 2 weeks. It felt like I'd discovered some secret that other people didn't know about. Like I was finally going to be financially successful, instead of just scraping by." I listened without interrupting as Kevin described how his initial success had led to larger bets and more frequent trading sessions that consumed hours of his day and night. When his personal savings were exhausted, he'd convinced himself that using Emma's college fund was justified because he'd make enough profit to replace her money and have additional funds for her education. I told myself I was being a good father, using Emma's money to make more money for her future, Kevin said, looking at his hands rather than meeting my eyes. "I had spreadsheets showing how much I'd make if the investments went well, how I'd be able to pay for her entire college education, plus graduate school if needed. But instead of profits, Kevin had experienced a series of devastating losses that wiped out not only Emma's $127,000 college fund, but also additional money he'd borrowed against his house and his retirement account. The gambling addiction had progressed to the point where he was trading cryptocurrency 18 hours a day, missing work and neglecting his health while chasing losses with increasingly desperate bets. I haven't slept more than 2 or 3 hours a night in months, Kevin admitted. I kept thinking the next trade would be the one that brought everything back, that I just needed one good day to recover Emma's money and fix everything I'd broken. The pamphlets I'd found were from a recent visit to a gambling addiction counselor. Kevin's first acknowledgement that his cryptocurrency trading had become an uncontrollable compulsion rather than a rational investment strategy. But even the counseling session had been motivated more by fear of discovery than genuine desire for recovery, and Kevin had continued gambling even after seeking help. Emma's supposed to start college in August, I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the rage building inside me. She's planning to study education and become a teacher. She's worked summers and weekends for 2 years saving additional money for her dormitory and textbooks. What exactly did you plan to tell her? Kevin's answer revealed how completely his addiction had distorted his thinking and priorities. I was hoping to get a loan against the house, maybe take out student loans in her name, something to cover the first semester while I continued trading to make back the money. The casual way he discussed potentially destroying Emma's financial future with student debt, while he continued the gambling that had already stolen her college fund, made me realize that my son had become someone I didn't recognize, someone whose addiction had made him willing to sacrifice his own daughter's future for the chance at another bet. I insisted that Kevin tell Emma the truth immediately, because she deserved to know what had happened to her college fund and make informed decisions about her future rather than discovering the theft when her tuition payment bounced in August. The conversation took place that evening at my house, with Emma sitting across from her father at the same kitchen table where I'd raised Kevin after his father died when he was 12. Emma's initial reaction was confusion, rather than anger, as if she couldn't process what Kevin was telling her about losing her college fund to cryptocurrency gambling. But Dad, you said you were investing my money to make it grow faster than a regular savings account, she said, her voice small and bewildered. You showed me charts and graphs about how much money I'd have by graduation. Kevin had to admit that all the charts and investment reports he'd shown Emma over the past year were fabricated, created to hide his gambling losses while maintaining her trust and preventing her from asking questions about her college fund. He'd even staged fake phone calls with financial advisors while Emma was present, performing elaborate deceptions to convince her that her money was being professionally managed for maximum growth. I kept thinking I'd make it all back before you needed it, Kevin said, his explanation sounding pathetic, even to himself. I never wanted you to worry or feel insecure about your future. I thought I could fix everything without you ever knowing there had been a problem. But Emma was 18 years old, not the child Kevin was treating her as, and she understood immediately that her father had stolen her future while lying to her face for months. You sat with me while I filled out college applications and talked about my major and my career plans, knowing that you'd already spent my tuition money gambling, she said, her voice gaining strength as the full scope of his betrayal became clear. The worst part was watching Emma realize that every conversation she'd had with Kevin about college planning had been a lie designed to cover his theft of her education fund. He'd encouraged her to apply to expensive universities because he claimed her investment returns would cover the higher costs, when in reality he was steering her toward greater financial aid dependency because he knew she'd have no family money to contribute. How am I supposed to go to college now? Emma asked, looking between Kevin and me with an expression that combined heartbreak with a premature adult understanding of financial reality. I've been accepted to OU with plans to live in the dorm and focus on my studies instead of working full-time. Without the college fund, I can't afford tuition, room, board, or anything else. Kevin tried to suggest that Emma could take out student loans to cover her education costs while he worked to rebuild her college fund, but I could see that Emma had already lost trust in any promises her father might make about her financial future. The man who had stolen her education money while lying about investment returns was not someone she could depend on for loan repayment assistance or financial support. That's when I made a decision that would change all our lives. Emma, you're going to college as planned. I'll make sure you have the money you need for your education. The next morning, I drove to my bank and spoke with Patricia Williams, my personal banker for over 15 years, about liquidating my retirement accounts and certificate of deposits to replace Emma's stolen college fund. What I learned during that meeting made me realize the full scope of Kevin's betrayal and the difficult choices I'd have to make to protect my granddaughter's future. Mrs. Walsh, converting your retirement savings to pay for Emma's college would leave you financially vulnerable. Patricia explained as she reviewed my account balances and pension income. You'd be giving up the security and compound interest that took decades to build, potentially leaving yourself dependent on others in your later years. My total retirement savings were $89,000 in certificates of deposit and $34,000 in a traditional IRA, money I'd saved by working as a school secretary for 38 years and living frugally since my husband died 18 years ago. It wasn't enough to fully replace the $200,000 Kevin had stolen, but it would cover Emma's tuition and basic expenses for 4 years at a state university if she lived modestly and worked part-time. But Patricia also helped me understand that there might be legal options for recovering Emma's college fund that didn't require me to sacrifice my retirement security. If your son used Emma's money without proper authorization, especially if he had a fiduciary responsibility as the account manager, this could constitute theft or embezzlement that might be prosecuted criminally or recovered through civil litigation. I'd given Kevin power of attorney over Emma's college fund account when she was 16, thinking it would be easier for him to manage investment decisions and account transfers as she approached college age. I trusted him to act in Emma's best interests, never imagining he'd use that access to steal her education money for gambling purposes. The power of attorney was supposed to be used for Emma's benefit, not for Kevin's personal gain, Patricia explained. Using those funds for gambling could be considered a breach of fiduciary duty that might give you grounds to recover the money through legal action. But legal action would take months or years to resolve, and Emma needed her college money by August if she was going to start her freshman year as planned. I could either liquidate my retirement savings immediately to ensure Emma's education continued, or I could pursue legal remedies that might eventually recover her money but would delay her college plans indefinitely. I also learned that Kevin's gambling losses might not be limited to Emma's college fund. Patricia's review of my financial records showed that Kevin had been asking me to co-sign for loans and credit applications over the past year, requests I'd refused because I didn't understand why he needed additional credit when he claimed his investments were performing well. Mrs. Walsh, given what you've discovered about Kevin's gambling problem, you should check your credit report to make sure he hasn't opened accounts or applied for loans using your personal information, Patricia advised. Financial addiction often leads to identity theft within families, especially when the addict has access to their relatives' personal information. That afternoon, I ordered credit reports from all 3 agencies and discovered that Kevin had indeed attempted to open credit card accounts and apply for personal loans using my social security number and personal information. Most of the applications had been denied because of my limited income, but one credit card had been approved with a $5,000 limit that Kevin had immediately used for online gambling. I spent the weekend researching my legal options and consulting with an attorney who specialized in financial fraud and elder abuse cases. What I learned convinced me that Kevin needed to face criminal prosecution, not just for stealing from Emma, but to prevent him from continuing to victimize family members to fund his gambling addiction. Attorney Michael Richardson reviewed the evidence I'd gathered about Kevin's theft of Emma's college fund and unauthorized use of my personal information for credit applications. Mrs. Walsh, your son has committed multiple serious crimes, he explained. Theft of funds held in trust, identity theft, credit fraud, and potentially elder abuse if he used his position as your son to gain access to your personal financial information. The elder abuse charges were particularly serious because Kevin had used his relationship with me to gain access to Emma's college fund account and to attempt credit fraud using my personal information. Oklahoma law treated financial crimes against elderly family members as aggravated offenses with enhanced penalties, specifically designed to protect vulnerable seniors from exploitation by their own relatives. Even if Kevin claims he intended to repay Emma's money eventually, the fact that he used those funds for gambling purposes without her knowledge or consent constitutes theft, Richardson explained. The gambling addiction might be considered a mitigating factor during sentencing, but it doesn't excuse the criminal behavior or eliminate the legal consequences. I filed criminal complaints with the Oklahoma City Police Department that Monday morning, providing Detective Sarah Martinez with all the evidence I'd collected about Kevin's theft and fraud. Detective Martinez specialized in financial crimes and was familiar with gambling addiction cases that involved family members victimizing each other to fund their compulsive behavior. Unfortunately, we see cases like this more frequently now, because online gambling and cryptocurrency trading have made it easier for people with addictions to access and lose large amounts of money quickly, Detective Martinez explained. Your son's case follows a pattern where gambling addicts exhaust their own resources and then move on to family money they have legitimate access to through joint accounts or power of attorney arrangements. Kevin was arrested at his workplace 3 days later, charged with theft, identity theft, and elder abuse under Oklahoma statutes that carried potential sentences of up to 10 years in prison. The arrest was reported in the local newspaper because of the unusual circumstances involving a father stealing his daughter's college fund for gambling purposes. The media attention brought unexpected support from the community, including several local business owners who had heard about Emma's situation and wanted to help ensure she could still attend college despite her father's betrayal. The University of Oklahoma's Financial Aid Office also reached out to offer additional scholarship opportunities and work-study programs that could help Emma afford her education, even without her stolen college fund. But the most important outcome was that Kevin was finally forced to confront the full consequences of his gambling addiction and the damage he'd done to his family relationships through his criminal behavior. Kevin pled guilty to all charges rather than put Emma and me through the stress of a trial, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months if he successfully completed gambling addiction treatment programs. The judge also ordered full restitution to Emma's college fund, though we all knew Kevin had no assets or income that would allow him to repay the stolen money anytime soon. "Mr. Walsh, you stole your daughter's future to fund a gambling addiction," Judge Roberts said during sentencing. "You betrayed the trust of your mother, who gave you access to family funds because she believed you would act in Emma's best interests. Your actions represent a profound failure of parental responsibility and family loyalty that has damaged relationships that may never fully recover." Emma chose not to attend the sentencing hearing, telling me that she wanted to focus on preparing for college rather than watching her father face the consequences of his betrayal. She'd received enough scholarship money and financial aid to cover her freshman year expenses and had found a campus job that would help with her living costs while allowing her to maintain her academic focus. The community support for Emma's education had been overwhelming, with local businesses, church groups, and even strangers who'd read about the case contributing to a scholarship fund that would help cover her remaining college expenses. The Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce had also created an internship program specifically for students like Emma who had overcome significant family financial betrayal to pursue their education goals. But the most difficult part of the recovery process was helping Emma understand that Kevin's gambling addiction and criminal behavior were not her fault, and that she shouldn't feel guilty about pursuing legal action against her own father. The theft had forced Emma to mature quickly and take control of her own financial future at an age when most students could depend on their parents for support and guidance. "I keep wondering if there were signs I should have noticed," Emma told me during one of our weekly dinners. "Maybe if I'd asked more questions about my college fund, or demanded to see the actual investment statements, I could have stopped him before he lost everything." I assured Emma that Kevin's deception had been sophisticated and deliberate, designed specifically to prevent her from discovering his theft until it was too late to recover her money. The fake investment reports, the staged phone calls with fictitious financial advisors, even his encouragement for her to apply to expensive universities, all of it had been calculated to maintain her trust while he systematically stole her future. The hardest conversation was when Emma asked me whether I thought Kevin's gambling addiction was a real disease that deserved sympathy, or simply a character flaw that justified his criminal prosecution. I told her that addiction might explain Kevin's behavior, but it didn't excuse the damage he'd done or eliminate the need for consequences that might prevent him from hurting other family members in the future. Emma started her freshman year at the University of Oklahoma in August, as originally planned, despite everything Kevin had done to destroy her education plans. She majored in elementary education, with a minor in financial literacy, inspired by her experience with Kevin's theft, to help other young people understand personal finance and protect themselves from family financial abuse. Her first semester grades were outstanding, and she quickly became involved in campus organizations focused on helping first-generation college students navigate academic and financial challenges. Emma's story had become well known on campus through the scholarship program that had helped fund her education, and she used that platform to educate other students about warning signs of gambling addiction and family financial exploitation. "I want other people to understand that family members can be financially dangerous," Emma told a group of freshman students during a financial literacy workshop she'd organized. "Just because someone is related to you doesn't mean you can trust them with your money or your future. You have to protect yourself and ask questions when things don't make sense." Emma had also become financially independent in ways that most 18-year-olds never experience, managing her own bank accounts, scholarships, and work-study income without any family assistance. The experience of having her college funds stolen had taught her to value financial security and to never depend on others for her economic well-being. During Kevin's first parole hearing, Emma wrote a letter to the parole board explaining how his theft had affected her life and her relationship with family members. She didn't oppose his early release, but she wanted the board to understand the long-term consequences of his actions and the importance of ensuring he genuinely addressed his gambling addiction before returning to the community. "My father's gambling addiction destroyed more than just my college fund," Emma wrote. "It destroyed my ability to trust family members with financial matters, forced my grandmother to sacrifice her retirement security to help me, and taught me that even parents can prioritize their addictions over their children's futures." The letter was respectful, but honest about the damage Kevin's criminal behavior had caused, and it emphasized Emma's hope that he would use his time in prison to genuinely address his addiction rather than simply serving his sentence and returning to the same destructive patterns. Emma graduated with honors 4 years later, having maintained excellent grades while working part-time throughout college and completing internships that led to multiple job offers in elementary education. Her college success story became a model for other students who had overcome family financial betrayal to achieve their educational goals. 5 years after Kevin's arrest, Emma was teaching 3rd grade at an elementary school in Norman, while completing her master's degree in education administration. Kevin had been released from prison after serving 3 years of his sentence and had completed an intensive gambling addiction treatment program. But Emma maintained only limited contact with him and had made it clear that rebuilding their relationship would require years of consistent behavior change on his part. I was proud of Emma's success and independence, but I was also aware of the costs that Kevin's betrayal had imposed on our entire family. My retirement savings were gone, spent on Emma's college expenses and legal fees, which meant I was financially dependent on my Social Security and pension income, with no emergency fund or investment reserves for unexpected expenses or health problems. Kevin had found work as a maintenance supervisor at an apartment complex and was required to make monthly restitution payments toward Emma's college fund, though at his current income level it would take him over 20 years to repay the money he'd stolen. He attended Gamblers Anonymous meetings twice weekly and had signed agreements that prevented him from accessing any online gambling or cryptocurrency trading platforms. "I know I can never undo the damage I did to Emma's trust or the sacrifices you made to fix my mistakes," Kevin told me during one of our monthly dinners, our first regular contact since his release from prison. "I wake up every day knowing that my gambling addiction stole Emma's college fund and your retirement security, and that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for those failures." The most important outcome was that Emma had not only survived Kevin's betrayal, but had used the experience to build strength, independence, and a career dedicated to helping others. Her financial literacy programs for young people had reached hundreds of students who learned about budgeting, saving, and protecting themselves from family financial exploitation. "I wouldn't wish what happened to me on anyone," Emma told a group of high school seniors during a college preparation workshop. "But surviving my father's theft taught me that I could overcome challenges I never imagined facing and build a life based on my own work and decisions, rather than depending on other people's promises." The college fund that Kevin had stolen was never fully recovered, but Emma's education had been completed through scholarships, work-study programs, and my retirement savings. More importantly, she'd gained financial independence, career success, and the knowledge that she could survive and thrive even when the people she trusted most betrayed that trust in the most devastating ways possible. Kevin's gambling addiction had cost our family over $150,000 in direct losses and thousands more in legal fees, opportunity costs, and emotional damage. But Emma's response to that betrayal had created something valuable from the destruction: a young woman who understood the importance of financial independence, who could help others avoid similar victimization, and who had built a successful life on her own terms, despite the obstacles her father had created. Sometimes the most important victories come not from preventing betrayal, but from refusing to let that betrayal define your future or limit your possibilities.